Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. I've got an interview with three young people from Mexico City who work with a social cannabis club that helps medical marijuana patients hook up with doctors and learn about the laws and teaches them how to grow their own. It's actually in conjunction with a college started 20-plus-year-old radio station in Mexico City called Radio Panchinko, which means radio pothead. And the social club is Club Cannabico Xochipilli. And so they'll be saying those names some more. Tonight's show, after our hemp news segment, will have a lot of Spanish. If you're patient, you can hear this young lady give a very good interpretation of those Spanish passages. So stay tuned as we bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaf.
I feel the force.
Okay, welcome back to Cannabis Common Sense, and this is our hemp news segment. It's been an exciting couple of weeks. Just last week, 5 different states legalized marijuana. There's talk about federal legalization, and our first story tonight is from Washington, D.C. about a new poll just out this week after the election. Nearly 7 in 10 Americans support legalizing the possession and use of marijuana by adults, according to nationwide polling data compiled and some reported by the Gallup Association. 68% of respondents endorsed legalization. That's the highest percentage of support ever reported in a national Gallup poll. In 1969, when Gallup first began surveying the question, 51 years ago, only 12% of Americans backed marijuana legalization. In 1996, when California voters became the first state in the nation to legalize cannabis for medical use, only 25% of Americans said that marijuana should be legal for those aged 21 and older. Since 2012, when Colorado, Washington became the first 2 states to legalize marijuana for adults, and we lost our first initiative to legalize it here in Oregon, only to come back and win 2 years later. But in 2012, public support for legalization had risen to some 20 percentage points to 45% nationally. Legalization's enjoyed majority support among Americans since 2013. Today, adult use legalization holds majority support among Americans in every age group, including those aged 65 and older, which endorse it by 55%, according to this Gallup poll. The poll results come just days after voters in 4 states, Arizona, Montana, New Jersey, and South Dakota, overwhelmingly decided in favor of statewide ballot measures legalizing the adult use and retail sale of cannabis. In national polls and at the ballot box, the American public spoken loudly and clearly. The overwhelming majority of Americans favor ending the failed policies of marijuana prohibition and replacing it with a policy of legalization, regulation, taxation, and public education. Elected officials at both the state and federal level ought to be listening. 15 states and the District of Columbia have either enacted or have voted to enact adult use legalization laws, while 36 states, including D.C., have either enacted or voted to enact medical marijuana access laws, Mississippi becoming the newest state to join the medical marijuana group. There is no buyer's remorse on the part of the American people. In an era of state-level legalization, voter support for this issue has grown rapidly, an indication that these policy changes have been successful and are comporting with voters' desires and expectations. Today, voters of every age and in virtually every region of the country agree that marijuana should be legal. We have a mandate from the American people, and we intend to make sure that elected officials abide by it. And less than a week after Election Day, in which voters in 5 states approved ballot measures legalizing marijuana in some form, a top leader in the United States House of Representatives announced that the U.S. Congress will hold a floor vote on a bill to end federal cannabis prohibition next month, in the month of December. While the presidential election has seized national attention, with advocates hoping President-elect Joe Biden will make good on his campaign pledge to pursue modest marijuana reform starting next year, the comprehensive marijuana legalization bill is still in play during the current Congress. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, who helped elect Biden by backing him in South Dakota, his first successful primary this year in his run for presidency, that completely turned over. Steny Hoyer saved Biden's candidacy. And you can think of some other nouns there. But Steny Hoyer previously announced this summer that the chamber would vote on the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or the MORE Act, in September, but that plan was postponed following pushback from certain centrist Democrats who worried about the optics of advancing cannabis reform before passing another coronavirus relief package. Several of those members who were voted out during an election in which voters in red states such as Montana and South Dakota approved cannabis legalization ballot measures, raising questions about the lawmakers' strategic thinking on the issue. In any case, Hoyer confirmed on Monday this week, the 9th of November, that voters' marijuana legalization is still on the table before the presidential transition and will get a vote in December. That could also raise the pressure on Biden to embrace legalization, a policy he's declined to adopt despite supermajority support among Democratic voters and majority support among all ages of Americans. The United States House of Representatives will vote on the MORE Act to decriminalize cannabis and expunge convictions for nonviolent cannabis offenses that have prevented many Americans from getting jobs, applying for credit and loans, and accessing opportunities that make it possible to get ahead in our economy, Hoyer said in a letter to his House members. The MORE Act, whose lead sponsor is Judiciary Committee Chairman Jared Nadler, Democrat from New York, would federally deschedule cannabis, expunge the records of those with prior marijuana convictions, and impose a federal 5% tax on sales revenue from which would be reinvested in communities mostly impacted by the drug war. The legislation would also create a pathway for resentencing for those incarcerated for marijuana offenses, as well as protect immigrants from being denied citizenship over cannabis and prevent federal agencies from denying public benefits or security clearances due to cannabis use. It cleared Nadler's panel, the House Judiciary Committee, the first time it ever cleared any major committee in the United States House of Congress to legalize marijuana. But it cleared that panel, the Judiciary Committee, a year ago, and it's been awaiting floor action since then. We look forward to working with the U.S. Congress to ensure the success of the first ever vote to end marijuana prohibition on the floor of a chamber of Congress. Even if the bill does not pass in the Democratic-controlled chamber, as it's expected to with some bipartisan support, it remains unlikely that the Senate will follow suit. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is a champion of the hemp industry but staunchly opposes further marijuana reform. Even so, a symbolic vote for legalization could send a strong signal to the incoming Biden administration. Vice President Kamala Harris is the lead Senate sponsor of the MORE Act, but she's indicated she would not proactively push the former Vice President Biden to evolve further on cannabis reform. Given Biden's former approach to championing punitive anti-drug legislation as a senator and his ongoing obstinance on marijuana legalization at a time when polls show that a clear majority of Americans favor this policy change, there remains some skepticism about his willingness to make good on his campaign promises to prioritize decriminalization or other reform bills he's discussed. However, the president-elect has conceded that his work on punitive anti-drug legislation was a mistake. Outside of Congress, Biden could also make moves to advance cannabis reform administratively. In fact, he could completely deschedule marijuana, take it off of the list of controlled substances with a presidential administrative act. He could reinstate a version of the Obama-era Justice Department memo that directed federal prosecutors to generally not interfere with state marijuana laws, which was rescinded by the Trump administration in 2018. It's also within the power of the executive branch to reschedule marijuana under the Controlled Substances Act. Biden has pledged to make a move to Schedule 2, though that would not achieve many of the changes we see. The president has the unilateral authority to grant acts of clemency, including pardons and commutations to people who've been convicted of federal marijuana or other drug offenses. He also gets to appoint an attorney general, a drug czar, and other officials who will make decisions on how the federal government handles cannabis, though many of those officials will be subject to Senate confirmation. Here in Oregon, our own Representative Earl Blumenauer, who heads the marijuana coalition in the United States Congress, said in this last August that, quote, the Biden administration and the Biden Department of Justice would be a constructive player in advancing legalization. And in New Jersey, where they just voted on 2 initiatives to legalize marijuana, members of 2 separate legislative committees on Monday, the 9th of November, voted to advance enabling legislation to implement Question 1, which is overwhelmingly approved by voters with 67% of the New Jersey vote on November 3rd to legalize and regulate marijuana production, use, and retail sales for adults in New Jersey. Companion bills A21 and S21 would allow adults 21 and older to legally possess and purchase up to 1 ounce of marijuana. Measures would also allow for home delivery, on-site consumption, protections for employees, students, parents, tenants, and those needing organ transplants, among other provisions. Lawmakers failed to include provisions allowing adults to cultivate marijuana for personal use. S21 was approved by the New Jersey Senate Judiciary Committee by a vote of 5-1, while A21 was approved by the Assembly Oversight Reform and Federal Relations Committee soon after. S21 and A21 are scheduled for additional hearings in the New Jersey Appropriations Committee in their respective chambers next week and require approval from those committees before receiving a floor vote in their respective chambers. New Jersey voters overwhelmingly approved Public Question 1 November 3rd, with 67% voting yes and only 33% voting no. Because Question 1 is a non-binding, legislatively referred ballot question, the New Jersey legislature must now take immediate action to draft and implement enabling legislation in a manner that's in accordance with voters' sentiments. Meanwhile, out west here, Montana voters overwhelmingly approved a pair of marijuana legalization ballot measures on Tuesday, but opponents are now attempting to invalidate the will of the voters, filing a new lawsuit that argues the main reform measure that passed is unconstitutional. The plaintiffs, a series of law enforcement officers in Montana, argue that voter-approved statutory proposal unlawfully appropriates funds, violating a portion of Montana's constitution that prohibits such activity from being included in citizen initiatives. The state Supreme Court declined to take the case last month, but it did not rule on the merits. Instead, it said the filers failed to establish the urgency needed to skip the lower court's adjudication process. They left open the door to pursuing the case in district and appeals court, however, and the plaintiffs went through with the option as they previously said they would. The legalization measure will establish a cannabis market for adult consumers in Montana, with resulting revenues to be earmarked and credited to specified programs and agencies for specified uses. Because it contains those provisions in this proposal, the plaintiffs say it's an appropriation of money by initiative in violation of state statute, end quote. The suit filed last week states. Attorneys representing the plaintiffs asked the court to deem the initiative unconstitutional, void in its entirety, and unenforceable. Under the proposal, Half of the public revenue generated from marijuana sales will go toward environmental conservation programs, a provision that earned the campaign key endorsements in September. The measure will also send funds toward veteran services, drug treatment, health care, and local governments, with the rest following to the general fund of Montana. Last month, a state lawmaker announced plans to request that a bill be introduced to repeal the legalization measure, but he set aside those plans this week following a strong vote in the Montana legislature in favor of the policy change. As of Friday afternoon's vote last week, tallying the initiative is ahead by 57 to 43%. Montana was one of 5 states that legalized marijuana in some form this week, along with Arizona, New Jersey, Mississippi, and South Dakota. Nationwide, voters passed every single major cannabis and drug policy ballot measure across the country this November 3rd, including decriminalization of psychedelic plants and fungi in Washington, D.C., and decriminalization of all drugs here in Oregon, as well as a separate measure here in Oregon to legalize psilocybin therapy. Beyond the statutory measure to establish legal cannabis market in Montana, Montanans also passed a constitutional amendment stipulating that only adults 21 and older can participate in the program. That initiative was not challenged by the opponent's lawsuit. Our last story tonight is from Italy. The daily administration of plant-derived cannabis extract significantly reduces pain and other symptoms in patients with a primary diagnosis of burning mouth syndrome. According to data published in the journal Pain Medicine, burning mouth syndrome is a neuropathic pain condition of unknown origin that can impact the roof of the mouth as well as the tongue, gums, lips, and sides of the cheeks. A team of Italian researchers treated subjects with extracts of cannabis, 1 gram of cannabis in 10 grams of olive oil, over a period of 4 weeks. The investigators reported, quote, subjects showed a statistically significant improvement over the term of a clinical remission of the oral symptoms. Levels of anxiety and depression also changed statistically, displaying a favorable improvement. No serious reactions were detailed. None of the patients had to stop the treatment due to adverse events, end quote. The authors of the study concluded, to date, no studies have provided evidence of a reliable and safe treatment for long-term management of burning mouth syndrome, both in terms of symptom relief and quality of life. This is, to the best of our knowledge, the first study analyzing the role of cannabinoids in the management of unresponsive burning mouth syndrome. In this pilot, administration of cannabis sativa oil provided was effective and well tolerated in patients with primary burning mouth syndrome. Further, bigger and properly defined randomized controlled trials with different therapeutic approaches or placebo control are needed, however, end quote. The full text of this study, evaluating the suitability and potential efficacy of cannabis sativa oil for patients with primary burning mouth syndrome, a prospective, open-label, single-arm pilot study, appears in this month's edition of Pain Medicine. That's the end of our hemp news segment tonight. We're back with some more interviews from Mexico, this time with a group of young people in Mexico City working with Radio Panchinko and the Club Cannabis. So stay tuned and remember, help restore hemp. Good night. So it is my honor to welcome several young people, to me they're young, from Mexico City, right? And
Yeah.
Radio Panchinko, which means radio pothead in Spanish. And they also have a social club where they help produce cannabis for the club members. And that is Club, how do you say it?
Xochipilli. Club Cannabico Xochipilli.
Club Cannabico Xochipilli.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that.
My pronunciation is probably bad, but I can't roll my R's like everybody that speaks Spanish can do. I don't know how to do that. So that's part of my excuse. So first of all, let's talk about the social club that you folks work with, the Club Cannabico Xochipilli. So tell us about the structure of clubs. Now I know and we talked about this in Puerto Vallarta last week. I know the social clubs in Spain have been set up to help the club members produce and get cannabis. Is that what you're doing in Mexico City?
Ujú. Ok, si podemos empezar a platicar acerca del Club Canábico, principalmente la estructura que tiene el Club Canábico Xochipilli, como lo mencionamos en Puerto Vallarta anteriormente, y no sé si nos pudieran platicar un poquito más acerca de este club y lo voy traduciendo al finalizar su reseña, chicos.
Claro. Club Canábico Xochipilli surge de la necesidad de defender los derechos humanos del ciudadano mexicano. Si tomamos una referencia de lo que hace los clubs en España, aunque nosotros bajo nuestro marco legal, pues lo que tomamos es nuestro derecho a asociación, nuestro derecho a nuestro libre desarrollo de la personalidad para ejercer entre todos, entre esa comunidad, lo que nos plazca, vamos, ¿no? Por derecho constitucional. Y nuestra idea o nuestro fin principal es defender los derechos humanos del consumidor.
Okay, so the first point of or the mission of this club principally is to defend the human rights. As we know, sometimes none of us or the majority of the people don't know about the human rights and also the possibility that we have, as in the Constitution said, of the free way of the person to create our own personality. So this is what Club Canábico focus on principally, to defend legally the human rights.
And the Supreme Court of Mexico has ruled several times that cannabis is a natural human right, that we have a natural right to use cannabis, is protected by the Mexican Bill of Rights and Constitution.
Exactly. Exactly. In the the first article of the Constitution, fraction 5, ¿es fracción 5, Iván?
Párrafo quinto.
The párrafo quinto, the fifth paragraph, it says that we have the
derecho a no discriminación por algún padecimiento de salud principalmente y por derecho a la dignidad humana. De ahí se desprende ese derecho que tenemos, se genera una jurisprudencia que no sé a lo mejor en otros países cómo se le pueda determinar, pero por decirlo en una palabra, es un antecedente legal, que una vez que se ganan 5 amparos en el mismo sentido, se genera una jurisprudencia con la cual ahí se establece que sería anticonstitucional prohibirnos del uso de la planta. Aún así, sí, aún así, aún con esa jurisprudencia, con ese antecedente que ya se fija en febrero del año pasado, del año 2019, hoy en día no tenemos una regulación para poder hacer uso de la planta como mejor nos plazca.
Okay. Even since February, from the last year, we have this I don't know if in your country called like this, but it's jurisprudence or jurisprudence.
Yeah.
Okay. Even when we have this, we don't have any regulation that allow to us the free consume or the recreative consume for this for the plant, and so this
law is that it's illegal. And so I know there's been, the Supreme Court set a deadline for the legislature, the federal Congress, the United States of Mexico to promulgate or create these new laws. And they've passed that deadline how many times? 4 times? 5 times? I know it was supposed to be legal about 1.5 years ago, and then 1 year ago, and then it's been, they haven't, the federal legislature in Mexico hasn't met that deadline, correct?
That's correct. Actually, last Monday, there were a meeting just right to the government offices in order to know what is happening, why are they delaying these regulations, and why are they delaying this for the small companies that wants to support this increase in these regulations for the plant. Iván, ¿cuántas veces han sido las veces que han aplazado esta regulación o esta solicitud de regulación por parte de la Suprema Corte?
Ha sido en distintas ocasiones. ¿Hugo?
Sí, parece, si no llevo mal la cuenta, parece que son más de 3 veces las que ya se pospuso la regulación, bueno, el poder pasar 3 veces.
More than mínimo. 3 times. Minimum more than 3 times.
Yeah, I thought it had been passed. I was told last year in Mexico City in conjunction with the Cannabis Copa, that it's going to be legal then, and then again at Jalisco Cup. But life goes on. We keep pushing our federal legislature in the United States too. Let me kind of jump back. I don't think I remembered to do a formal introduction. I'd like each of you to go through and introduce yourself, starting with you, Jessica, and just say who you are and you know what you represent. So first Jessica, and then we'll ask Hugo and Ivan as well.
Okay.
And you can translate for them.
Claro que sí, nos vamos a presentar más como formalmente quiénes somos y qué estamos haciendo en digamos que pues actualmente tanto en el club como en el radio. My name is Jessica. I'm Ivan's friend, but I'm also helping to him since a year ago, trying to do these activities, breaking some obstacles that we sometimes because of the language, but we have in common every nation. So yeah, I'm here in representation of Club Canábico Xochipilli and also the radio, trying to explain something in English. And also it's a pleasure to meet more and more people interested in this plant and in the not only the medical benefits, but the economical and the employee and many aspects of this topic. So nice to meet you, everyone.
Thank you, Jessica. And who wants to go next?
Hugo. Iván, Hugo.
Yo soy Hugo Alberto Sánchez. Pues ayudo en la parte de la organización, en la parte de la estructura del club, en la toma de decisiones, en la proposición de cómo vamos a actuar, en hacer presencia en los eventos. Pues somos el rostro de Xochipilli, ¿no? Somos quien estamos representando a todas las personas, a la mayoría de los usuarios comunes en México. Yo soy quien tiene el acercamiento con las personas para ser escuchados, quien contesta los teléfonos, quien atiende a las personas, quien canaliza a los pacientes con los médicos, quien canaliza a los usuarios en el caso de que se requiera con los abogados, quien da la información. Y bueno, eso es lo que hago yo. Y en el radio, bueno, tengo un par de programas en Radio Pacheco, un programa que tiene que ver con metal, un programa en donde se hacen sesiones en vivo. Y bueno, lo que nosotros tratamos de hacer siempre es llevar la información pues a las personas, ¿no? De todo lo que está sucediendo en la cuestión legislativa, nosotros toda esa información pasarla a las personas que no tienen acceso a esa información. Eso es lo que hago yo en parte del club, también un poco de la parte pues administrativa, financiera, de impuestos también, de la parte de la contabilidad también me encargo yo, y bueno, y entre muchas otras cosas más.
Okay. As
You
you
gotta
can
have a good memory to remember all that.
I'm
I
trying.
hope she
I'm
does.
to get
No,
my
you're
notes.
taking notes. Good.
Okay. Well, he's on charge of all the administration part. When one user wants to know more about how to get um, mm, a doctor opinion, a medical opinion, or a legal opinion, he receives the phone calls. He's like the first contact and the face of the club in some events. Also in Radio Pacheco, he has two channels or two radio stations or two programs, sorry. One metal and el otro programa de qué es, Hugo, metal y qué más?
Y son sesiones en vivo, bueno,
Ah,
música.
and okay, and music in live music. And he's also when there's a meeting or there's some yeah, like a team supporting the events, he's always there. And also he works really hard on the communicate all the advances of the regulations to the social media, Facebook and Instagram video live, yeah, to try to keep all the community like motivated. And yeah, basically. And also he's on charge of taxes and
Oh,
administration
okay.
parts.
Sounds like a lot of very important duties.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that, Hugo. So, so next, Ivan.
Hola, Iván. Mi nombre es Iván Almodóvar. Yo soy el representante legal de Club Canábico Xochipilli. Me he visto orillado a continuar este proyecto que inicié con mi tío hace 4 años cuando inició el club. Empecé a trabajar con él y ahora me vengo a incorporar de lleno y a vigilar todo lo que respecta a Club Canábico Xochipilli, a Fundación Ananda, que también es la fundación que ve esta cuestión de proteger el derecho a la salud de las personas y los derechos humanos, donde tratamos lo legal y lo médico de los usuarios. También estar al pendiente, por supuesto, de Radio Pacheco y de todo lo que surge de nuestro movimiento.
Okay. Okay, muy bien. Well, he's Ivan. 4 years ago, his uncle create this club and this movement, this project. Unfortunately, he is not anymore with us. We have a month more or less that he unfortunately he passed away.
Well, my
So
for your uncle. My condolences for that loss.
Thanks a lot, man.
yeah. So he's on charge right now of the activities. He's a legal representative of the Club Canábico Xochipilli. And also, I don't know, Paul, if we talk about Fundación Ananda that Ivan just mentioned right now. Fundación Ananda is helping to protect the human rights also, and the human of the health of the that we have in as humans. A ver, let me know. Human, sorry. Yeah, the health rights. Um, and the legal part of when someone wants some help in any of that two conditions, he he's on charge of that also.
All right.
Mhm, yeah.
Great. So tell us a little bit more about the club and how outside of kind of when people call in, you help them find doctors. What other activities? I know we met in Puerto Vallarta where was interviewed by you, Jessica, and Ivan, and met you folks just last week. And what other duties do you do with the club? Is it like a social club where you can produce cannabis? Is that legal? Or can you tell me?
Okay. ¿Qué otras actividades tienen dentro del Club Canábico Xochipilli? ¿Producen cannabis? ¿Producen algún tipo de, bueno, es como un club social? ¿O qué actividades principales son las que se enfocan en el Club Canábico?
No, nosotros no producimos cannabis, actualmente lo tenemos prohibido. Lo que hacemos es que, bueno, actualmente el ciudadano mexicano tiene derecho a aportar 5 gramos de marihuana para su uso personal. Entonces, nosotros en Club Canábico Xochipilli les ofrecemos un espacio de libre consumo, ya que mucha gente, al verse intimidada por su propia familia o mal vista por su propia familia, tiende a ir a fumar a las calles donde es ilegal fumar. Es legal actualmente en México fumar en un espacio privado, y es lo que le ofrecemos a las personas. Un espacio de libre consumo, de información también, y un lugar donde pueden ejercer diversas actividades que van ligadas con la planta. Por ejemplo, yoga, ¿no? Solo por decir alguna de las tantas cosas que la gente puede hacer bajo su consumo, su consumo responsable, por supuesto mayores de edad.
También,
Ok.
también, bueno, que también los enseñamos al cultivo, ¿no? Los enseñamos a cultivar, pese a que a nosotros no lo tenemos permitido, siempre, bueno, se promueven amparos para poder cultivar, y a las personas que, pues, tienen su amparo, nosotros les enseñamos también a cultivar, desde la semilla hasta poder hacer la extracción del aceite. Entonces damos talleres de cultivo, talleres de extracción y talleres, bueno, y pues juntas o médica para los pacientes o para los parientes, ¿no? O sea, cercanos al paciente, para los cuidadores, que son los que la mayor parte del tiempo pues están ahí. Bueno, pues requieren esa información para poder hacer su medicina.
Okay, thank you. Right now they are not producers, as it's kind of difficult because of the legal part. But they, sorry, Stanford is still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm
Okay,
listening.
okay, sorry. Yep. Okay, sure. As they don't, we don't have like any space where we can be consuming or being users. So Club Canábico Xochipilli is focused on give this space to the users in order to don't be smoking in the street, because we know it won't be a happy ending. So in order to have protect the people, protecting the users, we have this space where you can go have some talk with the other people, smoke, and not only smoke, have some workshops where you can learn something about, for example, yoga, or how to have your own cultivation in your house, how to
That's very important.
they are what?
I said that's very important to be able to grow your own.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, it's one of the initiatives that they are working on also, and they are supporting, because having their own cultivations for our own will help a lot to the users. They have not to be on risk on the streets, and have all the good parts from the plant. So yeah, they are making these workshops and also teaching to the people how to do it. And in case of one of them have um, problems, healthy problems, they are helping to the familiar and the patient to get this consulta, medical opinion and
Yeah.
legal opinion. So
That's
basically,
great.
the club is focused on this activity, and yeah, but doing these spaces for the users.
So it's education and community support
Yeah,
primarily, I would say.
yeah.
Um, so if someone wanted to find out more about Club Cannabico Xochipilli, what would the
Right.
website? I'm getting it right. Okay, I learned slowly. I'm an old guy, but uh, where would they go on the internet to find out more?
Ok,
Las
chicos, si
páginas
pueden
web
mencionar
donde
sus
nos pueden
redes
encontrar.
sociales.
We'll put it up in Bill. We'll put it up in graphics here on the screen too.
Ah, thank you. Si pueden mencionar sus redes sociales, chicos, para que lo pongan en gráfico también.
Ok, sí, bueno, es clubcanábicosochipili.org como Club Canábico y www.fundacionananda.mx.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll
and
text it
so
over to me, and I'll text it to Bill, and maybe you can text it right inside this thing. in
okay,
Skype.
okay, okay, we'll text it. Se lo mandamos por un mensajito aquí en Skype. And also, I think it's really important to mention this. Xochipilli is an a god and Mexican, how to say it, like ancestral god. And before, when the people have one god for each for example, one god for the fire, one god for the sun, one god for the earth. So Chipili is the god for the earth. Okay. We also want to mention, Paul, that this club is one of the first in Mexico to promote
The first.
collect.
We're the first club
Well,
and the
the
biggest.
first club. Sorry, thank you. The first club to promote a collective protection for the user. We call here in Mexico Amparo. It's a protection of the for the user, in order to have a space with all the, well, in order to have a space where you can consume for free and have good plants, quality plants, and with all the responsibility for plus 18 years, to go there, have a good time, and being protected by these regulations and this amparo.
You know, here where I live in Portland, Oregon, which is right on the northwest corner of the United States. And right across a big river, it's called the Columbia River, is the state of Washington. So we all voted together in 2012, and Washington won and Oregon lost. I told you about that in person. But then we came back here in Oregon and won 2 years later. But here in Oregon, every house can grow 4 plants. And in Washington, you cannot grow any. You have to buy it at a store. It's legal, but unless you're medical, you can't grow it. Here in Oregon, every household gets 4 plants, but if you're medical, you get more. You want to explain that?
Yes, yes, for sure. En Oregon, por ejemplo, que está como sabido también que pues hay una libertad de poder cultivar sus propias plantas sin alguna restricción de número de plantas, digamos. En cambio, en Washington es legal, pero solamente tienen la oportunidad de cultivar 4 plantas, de tener 4 plantas. Entonces, pues bueno, ahí también digamos que 4 plantas, pues sí es como un número bastante reducido a mi parecer, ¿no?
Sí.
Es lo que es también lo que se está pidiendo. Actualmente se está alzando la voz y lo que se pide a las autoridades es una regulación sin límite de cultivo, sin límite de portación, ya que lamentablemente en México tenemos esa
barrera, ¿no?
Sabes que las autoridades mexicanas, un policía, si tú puedes cargar, si en determinado momento te dicen que puedes tener determinado número de plantas o que puedes cargar, que puedes portar determinado número de gramos, la misma policía te planta, te pone más para que entonces caigas en el delito.
Okay.
Ese es el problema con nuestro sistema. Ese es el problema en nuestro país, que no podemos conformarnos con una cantidad. Debemos pedir el que no sea un límite de cultivo, de portación, porque corremos ese riesgo con la policía mexicana.
Si hay un límite de plantas o de portación, sigue habiendo criminalización por parte de...
Discriminación.
Okay. In this case, Paul, we're trying to raising up our voice to take out the minimum number of the plants for cultivation, the minimum for caring with our stuff, because is a big problem in our country. Unfortunately, the system is trying to, in case I have just 4 plants in my house, but when the police come to my house and count that 4 plants, if they want, they can put into my bill 10 more. Or if they watch me on the street just smoking or carrying 5 grams, they can put a kilo into my pocket, and they will say, sorry, you are carrying this, it's not my problem. So this is why are we raising our voice, to try to take out these limits and
wrong corruption.
And wrong corruption, yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be horrible. To, you're allowed to have up to 5 grams, but then they put a kilo in, then they're facing jail, and that's horrible there, I know. So yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Radio Pachinko, and that's obviously Hugo has 2 music shows.
Sí, ¿nos quieres hablar más de Radio Pacheco y de los 2 shows que tienes, Hugo? ¿O que tienen en Radio Pacheco?
Ok, un poco tal vez de Radio Pacheco, de la historia de Radio Pacheco. Radio Pacheco nace en la huelga del 99-2000 en la UNAM, en el CCH Vallejo, que bueno, es una preparatoria, ¿no? Un nivel preparatoria aquí en México. Y bueno, nace con la idea de llevar información que estaba sucediendo durante la huelga pues a la comunidad universitaria. Después de un tiempo se siguió esa línea, pero se dejó de trabajar. Posteriormente, pues ya como Club Canábico Xochipilli, Jaciel Espinosa, el fundador del club, decide retomar ese proyecto que él comenzó en el CCH igual, lo retoma y entonces pues ya comenzamos a hacer los programas. Bueno, en Radio Pacheco básicamente lo que tratamos de hacer es hablar todo el tiempo sobre cannabis, ¿no? Dar información sobre cannabis, sobre el uso y bueno, todo lo que tiene que ver relacionado con eso. Pues hay varios programas, no solamente los dos míos, bueno, los que yo estoy ayudando a producir. Se han hecho programas con tinte de pues político, médico, con contenido feminista, y bueno, eso es parte de los proyectos que han salido de Radio Pacheco, ¿no? Como programas. En especial mi programa de metal, pues es solamente divertirme, solamente poner música que me agrada, hablar sobre temas que tienen que ver con el metal, temas que tengan que ver con el cannabis y cosas extrañas, monstruos. Y bueno, las sesiones en vivo es porque yo me considero un melómano, entonces, pues yo amo la música, entonces el apoyar los proyectos nuevos y que Radio Pacheco sea una plataforma para esos nuevos proyectos. Entonces, bueno, eso es como lo que se hace en los programas y en Radio Pacheco, básicamente, ¿no? Que es como el medio mediante el cual pues se transmite lo que se está haciendo lo que está sucediendo en el ambiente canábico en México. Eso.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, the Radio Pacheco was born on 1999. So it's not a new radio program. It has like many years, and they initially has a mission to transmit to the university. It was born like a university project, in where they were transmitting the notices, the news, and some advances for one march or strike that they had at that moment. So first was like a scholar project. The founder was Jaciel Espinosa, the same as Club Canábico Xochipilli. And after they noticed that it's not only about the school problems or the system at that time, they start talking about cannabis, how to have a better consume for the cannabis, and they also try talk about politic stuffs, medical stuffs, feminism, and in case of the program of the metal, Hugo considers himself as meloman people. So he likes also to support with this channel new ideas and new bands, and also old bands. So they are having good connections on this time. Actually, days ago on our social media, on the social media of Radio Pacheco, they have some ska concerts. So it's not only one topic, but involve all these topics into cannabis.
I see. Great.
Mm-hmm.
So people can tune into that. What is the website for Radio Pacheco?
Well, you can find it on social media, on Facebook as Radio Pacheco. I
So
think it's the only
C-A-N,
one.
Yeah.
C-H-E-N-K-O, I think. Radio.
Radio, PACHECO, or at Radio Pacheco 420, 420, Radio Pacheco 420, lo pueden buscar también.
All right, great. So I really appreciate all of your work here. And I know, you talked a little bit about the corruption and how sometimes the police plant drugs on you or excess to try to torture you, basically. So you have to deal with that potential corruption. And then another thing that you have to deal with, and we have to deal with some corruption here in the United States, but you have to deal with the potential of the big drug cartels interfering in your work. Or have you had any kind of problems with the various drug cartels, and have they opposed you, or have there been any effect or communication at all?
Ok. En el caso, bueno, que tenemos que estar lidiando, por ejemplo, con temas como lo es la plantación de alguna consumo extra, por ejemplo, si llevamos 5 gramos y nos plantan más, y todo este tipo de corrupción que hay actualmente en nuestro país. ¿Cómo lidiamos actualmente con el tema de los cárteles? ¿Ha existido alguna, como algún opinión o alguna, no sé, temor o abiertamente, como lo es, ¿no? Alguna ideología en la cual ustedes vayan, por aparte del tema de la corrupción actual y el sistema actual de carteles en México?
En realidad no hay ningún temor al respecto, no hemos tenido ningún problema con algún tipo de organización, con algún tipo de cartel. En realidad, lo que ha tenido el usuario mexicano, el Pacheco, o la persona que tiene alguna situación médica y que requiere de tratarse con medicina cannabinoide, el único obstáculo que ha tenido el usuario es en cuanto a la regulación, en cuanto a nuestras autoridades que no nos permiten hacer uso de la planta.
Okay. Well, right now we haven't get any like first advert, like how to say?
First-hand contact.
Yeah, that.
Good. Good.
But and we're not kind of. We're not kind of afraid of this topic because we born in this country, and we haven't the blood how to live, unfortunately, with this. But we are not having any discussion yet, but the principal stock or the principal obstacle that we have been presented is as the authority is not allowing the free consume or explode more about the plant in case of the patients that they want to know more about the plant. Maybe this is a big obstacle for them to help them to have this medicine or this CBD or this free consume for their health. This is the principal obstacle that we are presenting right now with the people interested in Club Canábico and Fundación Ananda. Is principally because of the authorities not allowing the regulations for the users.
Mm-hmm. So we're starting to run up our hour time here. So I really want to thank all of you for your work, and I recognize you're doing some of the same things that we were doing 15 years ago and so on. So just keep going and don't give up and follow your passion and love for this plant. And I believe we can change the world, and we need to, because, of deforestation and human rights and biodiversity and cultural diversity, I think, are several things that we're all working for. But so we're about out of time. Do you want to go through and say anything in particular in closing to our audience?
Thank you. Nos agradece mucho la participación que hemos tenido, la motivación obviamente que estamos poniendo en el proyecto que en su momento puso desde 50 años atrás. Y pues bueno, quiere que nos despidamos con algún mensaje en particular. ¿Quieren decir algo a la audiencia, Hugo, Iván?
Pues antes que nada, pues agradecemos a Paul por el espacio, por este contacto, también por todo el trabajo que él hizo y que ha hecho. Es un ejemplo a seguir, ¿no? Por lo que hacemos nosotros. Y pues la lucha al menos de nuestra parte no termina aquí, ¿no? Nuestra lucha va a seguir mientras los derechos humanos se sigan violando, ¿no? Entonces, eso es lo que yo quise dejar como mensaje, ¿no? Básicamente.
Gracias, Hugo. Thank you, Paul. You're like a big motivation for us. We will keep this. We call it the green fight. The green fight. We will keep this movement. And thank you so much for this big motivation. We like to keep defending the human rights and defending the regulation as soon as we can. Iván, ¿quieres decir algo?
Sí, no nos rendimos, Paul, no nos rendimos. Gracias también por tu trabajo, gracias por que el que seamos de diferentes países no quiere decir que no tengamos que pelear por todas las personas que no tienen acceso a su derecho a la salud. Nosotros seguiremos de este lado del globo con la lucha. Y muchas gracias.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. We don't give up in this project. We will keep fighting for the human rights in this side of the globe, in this side of the planet. We are from different countries, but it's not a barrier, an obstacle to separate. But we are together in the same. We're together in the same frequency and the same object, and
same community.
we're really thankful.
Yes.
So we are part of the same community, and we're international cannabis users. There are actually more cannabis users than there are Christians and Jews combined. So we're the biggest group in the world if we realize it. So,
we're really happy. We're being more and more every time, and we're really happy for that. And finally, I would like to thank you, and thanks Ivan, Club Xochipilli, Radio Pacheco, Hugo. I'm really glad of how they work and how the history and the experience you have, Paul, is a pretty good experience for us, also a good motivation for all the club and all the users, and we're so excited to have this interview with you. Thank you for the space.
It's been my pleasure, Jessica, Ivan, and Hugo. Hopefully my pronunciation will get better over time, but I appreciate your work, and thank you for coming on our TV show, and keep working to restore hemp.
We will. Seguiremos trabajando en esto. Thank
Thanks to
you.
you too, man.
Good night.
Thank you. Good evening.
Gracias.
Good night.
Bye.